You are watching the PowerPoint presentation on the book of Esther in the Old Testament. We are in chapter number 5. So read Esther chapter 5 verses 1 to 8. So Esther is ready to approach the king because she wants to ask the king to spare the nation from the order of annihilation. So she gets in her royal robes. She enters the inner court of the king and waits to see what the king will do. He was pleased with her, and the Hebrew says, she lifted up favor in his eyes. In other words, the king didn't see it in a hostile, angry manner. He saw it in a good way, like my wife is coming in, then she has something important to say, so he hands to her the golden scepter. And that means she's not under the sentence of death. In other words, the king has two prerogatives, wrath or mercy. He can have the person executed or he can show mercy. And that's what the golden scepter represents, mercy. We're all given mercy, by the way. So he says unto her that you can have whatever you want up to half the kingdom. Well, the offer of half the kingdom was probably an example of courtesy that was not intended to be taken literally. I don't know exactly for sure if that is true or not, but nevertheless, it's a friendly greeting. That's a good way to look at it. It wasn't wrath. So Haman is included. Now, why is Haman included? What makes the king suspicious of Haman? To avoid being alone with Xerxes, and to lull Haman into a false. So she doesn't feel the time is right now to give her petition to the king. So she invites him and Haman to another banquet. So the queen's going to have a banquet of her own. Because remember now that she's just sensing that with Haman present, this is not a good time to bring up the idea of canceling the order to kill all the Jews. So now we're in chapter 5. So Haman leaves the banquet in high spirits, or good heart. In other words, Haman is really proud of his rebellion. He's really proud of his anger. He's really proud of his spirit of murder. Now remember, the devil was a murderer from the beginning, the Bible tells us. So he felt honored to be included with the queen, asking him to come to the banquet. Well, Haman did not like it that Mordecai did not show him honor at the gate. Again, Haman's heart was filled with rage. So Haman will boast to his wife and his friends about all his wealth, his sons, and the ways that the king has honored him, his elevated position, the invitation to the queen's banquet. In other words, he's a braggart. Is it wise to boast? James tells us don't boast of tomorrow, for we don't know what tomorrow will bring, or let alone if we even be here. Always say, if the Lord wills. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So we're seeing the fulfillment of this whole idea of exalting oneself and then coming down. They who exalt themselves will be humbled, Jesus told us. And they who humble themselves will be exalted. Now that's another lesson. It's very clear in this book of Esther. his wife and his friends advise him to build gallows. Now, the gallows will be about 70 feet high. He asked permission of the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows. Now, one of the Bible trivia questions is, who is it in the Bible that was hung on the gallows that he built for somebody else to be hanged, to be hung? And of course the answer is, it's Haman. Now the height of the gallows was exorbitant. It's not taken seriously by some commentators, but is consistent with what we know of Haman's vanity and his obsessive desire for revenge. In other words, you don't need a gallows of 75 feet. If it's 10 foot, it's fine. A person just simply can't touch the ground with their feet, so even if it's maybe close to 6.5 feet high, it's just fine. But he wants it to be a big display. Wants to make a big show of it. Look, I've killed off our enemy here. Killed off Mordecai, the man who wouldn't bow to me. Now we're in chapter number 6. And this is where it gets good. Now the king, that is Xerxes, could not sleep. He has a restless night. He has insomnia. The Hebrew says, the sleep of the king fled. In other words, sleep didn't join him in his bed. Sleep said, I'm not going to be with you tonight. So it would be futile to speculate on the cause of his sleeplessness, but we can be sure of one thing. God was behind it. God was behind it. So what's the best way to get to sleep when you're restless? What's your answer? I like to tell my wife, just tune to a YouTube channel that has me on it and start to listen to me, and you'll be asleep in 2 minutes or less. The king ordered that the book of Chronicles be brought to him. And this is the book of memorable deeds, the chronicles of the daily events, the annals that contain the written records of facts and events that were important in the kingdom. Now, if that doesn't put you to sleep, I don't know what will. Get the minutes of your last meeting of church leaders. The records were to be read to the king. Why? Maybe he thought he should get caught up on some of his work. Or maybe he thought the records were so boring it'd put him right to sleep. Who knows? But once again, the point is, God is at work, even in the sleeplessness of King Xerxes. So the king will make a remarkable discovery. He will discover that Mordecai discovered a plot. But nobody rewarded Mordecai. It's an emptiness. Hey, this man discovered a plot to kill me and it was stopped and nobody rewarded him? Herodotus, that's a church historian, indicates that it was a point of honor with Persian kings to reward promptly and generously those who had benefited him. In other words, This should have been done immediately, and somehow it fell through the bureaucracy. The king's a little bit disturbed, but once again, Mordecai is going to be honored at a very strategic moment in history. So the king wants to set everything right and wants to reward Mordecai. Now Haman happens to be in the court at the time. Remember, it's late at night, but Haman is there. So Haman maybe knew that sometimes the king had restless nights, or maybe Haman had a restless night. Once again, it is God arranging the chess pieces on the chessboard of history. So the book of Esther is filled with so-called coincidences. Now, there are no coincidences with God in charge of a life, with God in charge of a nation. There are no coincidences. So we're into chapter 6 now, verses 6 to 11. Ill-timed arrival on an event or circumstance that is in itself desirable. That's the definition of irony. But the irony is that Haman, the one who hates Mordecai and the Jews, will select the way Mordecai is to be honored. In other words, he's filled with hatred for Mordecai. In fact, he's having a gallows built for him to kill him. But the king will order that Haman honor Mordecai. Once again, this is the reverse of the exalted will be humbled and the humble will be exalted. Haman suggests the following: a royal robe, royal horse, royal crest, a prince is to lead the way, and the prince is to make a proclamation as he leads. Haman must have been ecstatic in his anticipation of the high honor he thought was to be accorded to him before the people of Susa, in other words, the capital. In other words, Haman thought that all of this business about honoring somebody was really about honoring him, Haman. But he's going to be really shocked. But now the king is talking about honoring Mordecai, the Jew. Remember, the edict of destruction of all Jews was signed by the king. So the king's in a dilemma now. Imagine you're Haman, you're a servant of the king, and you must carry out his orders. How do you feel as you robe Mordecai? How do you feel as you get the royal horse ready? What are your thoughts as you parade Mordecai in the streets and you're issuing the proclamation about the one the king wants to honor? Once again, it was Mordecai who is being honored, not Haman. And Haman thought he was going to be honored. Now, Haman's wife and Haman's friend will have a sense of his downfall. Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. So they're basically issuing the word of God to Haman. Now Haman's heart is hardened, and it's just a lot like Pharaoh's heart was hardened. So the two friends of Haman are Zeresh and I don't have the other one here. The revival of the Jewish people since the time of Cyrus was sufficient to induce in the minds of the heathen, who were attentive to the signs of the time, the persuasion that this nation enjoyed divine protection. In other words, don't mess with them. And that's what Haman did. Now his friends are pretty much reminding him that he did something he should never have done. So I think I'll stop right here, and we'll pick it up later in chapter number 7. Thank you for watching. End of video.